with which you live in Devachan, in heaven, which is also transient, that we sometimes call spirit. But when you study the Book of Light, you will see, whenever we say spirit and mean spirit as a spiritual body, it will be clear. And when we sometimes say spirit and mean the monad, it will be clear too. Now when Hume added in his essay about the masses, dictated by the masses, but when he added by himself, on himself, the term God, that was a problem for the Mahatmas. Big problem. And they say, when I read what Hume writes, I will, and when he is publishing that, I will say to Blavatsky and Jival Kul, which was another high being, that they should refuse to accept that. I cannot accept, the Master wrote, that our holy philosophy is distorted in such a way. Now see, there was a problem already. Now one could argue, I have here the Isis Unveiled in front of me, German and English. One could argue, why did the masters not completely just dictate, as the great Chauhan did to me in Los Angeles throughout the years, until about 5,000 handwritten pages were accomplished? One could argue or ask, why didn't the masters teach or dictate Blavatsky every word? So then everything would be perfect. And the answer to that is that even masters have karma. Even masters have karma. Because they left nirvana, they were liberated, they are liberated beings, they surround themselves with physical matter for the purpose to aid mankind and to help us. And then that's when they are under the law of the Lipika of karma. So at the times of Blavatsky, the end of 19th century, that was the karma of the masters. And I mentioned it in the beginning. It was the first rays of that total light shining from the east. The second step allowed karmically the masters to reveal more, to have more influence on those authors, secret doctrine, on Blavatsky. The third step is the fully revealed teaching, ancient teaching in the Book of Light. Every sentence inspired or dictated by the Mahat Chauhan, by the great Chauhan. But in those days, the use of the term God was a problem for the masters. And they made it very clear that they did not agree with this adding of the term God to what they had dictated, to Hume, for instance. There was another problem of Blavatsky. She was not permitted to reveal fully the teachings in Isis Unveiled. So this is why the original title was The Veil of Isis. Clearly she chose that title because she wrote about the veil, not about what was behind the veil. She was not karmically permitted to do that, and the masters were not karmically permitted to dictate everything. But the karma in these days was that there should be a co-work together with Blavatsky. And so, one mistake after the other crept in. One problem was the later mentioning of the sevenfold constitution of the human being. Book of Light teaches the monad is surrounded by 7 sheaths, by 7 layers, from the physical, etheric, astral, mental, soul, and spirit. All these layers in different state of vibration, in different density, from the lowest dense physical body to the highest refined spiritual body. And after Isis unveiled, in which he pointed out that human being is 3, so to speak, we should understand that in those days religion saw the human being as 2, body and soul. And there was a problem already, because when the spiritists, they tampered with that of which they thought it is a soul. It was the astral body. And they interfered with the evolution of the being, especially after death, and so forth. This is all explained in the Book of Light. And Blavatsky, so to speak, presented the human being already as a reflection of the Holy Trinity: spirit, soul, and body. And everybody agreed. But then later, she spoke of 7 principles. And there's, of course, no contradiction. Man is 1, 2, 3, tetragrammaton 4, also 5, and also 7. It depends how you see him acting in those different layers. And so there was actually no contradiction between the writing in Isis and later, but the masters were almost forced to end that discussion and to say there's no contradiction. See, if Blavatsky would karmically have been permitted to reveal everything in Isis, she would have written about the human being being 3 and 7, with the monad in the core, and so forth. She did not. This was done later in Secret Doctrine and fully revealed in the Book of Light. So the Master said there's no difference between Isis and the later written Secret Doctrine. But the Master said, if no one has ever heard of the 7 principles, which are described or were described in Isis without further explanation as Trinity, for such a person who reads it in that way, there may have been a misunderstanding, may be possible, fundamental contradiction, but it was not. Because one must understand that Blavatsky had orders by the masters, I mentioned that already, how far she was able to go in her writing. And you see here confirmed by the master himself in his letters, the Mahatma letters, that the karma was on the masters and on Blavatsky. It was the beginning of a cycle. At that time, I mentioned it already, neither Christians nor Spiritists knew anything else than two principles, meaning a human being, body and soul. The latter they often called spirit. This was the literature of the time also. Spirit and body, or soul and body. And the first person was Blavatsky, with the guidance of Atria. I don't want to add something here to that term, but I say it energetically or for the purpose of vibration. I say that she was under the guidance, the order of Atria. And she was the first to show the difference between psyche and nu, between nefesh and ruach, between soul and spirit. Between soul and spirit. So from then on, it was spirit, soul, and body. And now comes another problem. She had to prove it. And she did so by quoting Paulus, Plato, Plutarch, Jacobus, other great wise men. And this again caused her critics to say that she was plagiarizing. And so there were endless debates, polemic, objections, and they said, these critics said, that the human being cannot have two souls. Cannot have two souls. They said, the human being can only have one soul and a body, or one spirit and a body. Now this, you could say quantum leap from 2 to 3, that was quite a problem during the time of Blavatsky. And of course, the human being is even more. He is 7. This is the teaching of the Book of Light, that you are 7 as a monad, when you surround yourself with these different layers or bodies, you could say, from the lowest, densest physical to the highest spiritual. So, and this was the reason they had to go step by step in the writings, in the teaching, in the revelation. And this is why there was first Isis unveiled, then karmically permitted the secret doctrine, and as a third step to complete that sacred occult trinity of teaching, the Book of Light. And so Synod was warned by the masters. The same Synod that did not understand the teaching of chains and rounds, we come to that, and who turned against Blavatsky. So the masters warned Synod to not see Isis as without mistakes or without failures. Right there and then, the masters pointed out that Isis had mistakes. So in the third step, it is permitted to me by the Mahachohan to correct Isis and to a certain extent also the secret doctrine, without accusing Blavatsky having done any mistakes. But it was, karmically, there was no other possibility than to present the writings as they were and are until now. And this is why we have the Book of Light.